In the summer of 1943, the Allied forces launched an ambitious invasion of Sicily, marking their first major step onto the European mainland. This operation was intended to knock Italy out of the war and open a new front that would stretch the German military defenses. Winston Churchill famously described Italy as the soft underbelly of the Axis powers, suggesting a path of least resistance toward ultimate victory. He envisioned that by striking here, the Allies could bypass the heavily fortified Atlantic Wall and strike at the heart of the Third Reich. However, the reality on the ground proved to be anything but soft, as soldiers encountered a brutal and unforgiving landscape of jagged mountains. Italy's geography is defined by its rugged spine, the Apennine Mountains, which created a natural barrier that favored the defenders at every turn. Deep river valleys and narrow coastal plains acted as natural fortresses, allowing German commanders to stall the Allied advance with minimal manpower. The German forces, led by Albert Kesselring, were masters of defensive warfare, utilizing the terrain to negate the Allied advantages in armor and air. The landings at Salerno in September 1943 quickly revealed the immense difficulty of conducting complex amphibious operations against a determined and prepared enemy. Allied troops were pinned to the beaches under heavy fire, struggling to establish a perimeter against intense German counterattacks that threatened the entire operation. It was a stark wake-up call that the campaign would not be the swift, decisive march through the countryside that many planners had initially hoped. As the Allies pushed northward, they found themselves fighting for every single ridge, hill, and village, often against an enemy who held the high ground. The campaign soon became defined by the grueling struggle for the Gustav Line, a series of fortifications specifically designed to halt the Allied advance. This defensive line stretched across the narrowest part of the Italian peninsula, anchored by the formidable natural obstacles of the Liri Valley. At the heart of this struggle stood the historic monastery at Monte Cassino, which became a grim symbol of the war's immense and senseless destruction. The monastery sat atop a mountain, providing the Germans with an unparalleled view of the Allied positions in the valley floor far below. For months, Allied forces launched wave after wave of assaults against these fortified positions, only to be repelled by concentrated artillery and machine gun fire. The weather turned against the attackers as well, with torrential rains turning the battlefield into a quagmire of mud that slowed movement to a crawl. Tanks and heavy equipment struggled to navigate the steep, winding roads, leaving infantry to bear the brunt of the fighting in the miserable conditions. In a desperate attempt to break the stalemate, the Allies launched the landings at Anzio in early 1944 to outflank the stubborn Gustav Line. The operation achieved surprise, but the momentum was quickly lost as the beachhead became a trap, with soldiers pinned down by relentless German fire. For weeks, the men at Anzio lived in a state of constant peril, enduring a hellish existence within a shrinking perimeter under constant bombardment. This prolonged stalemate underscored the sheer tenacity of the German defense and the tactical difficulties inherent in the Italian theater of operations. Dislodging German forces from these fortified mountain positions required staggering casualties and relentless, punishing efforts from Allied troops on the ground. Every mile gained was paid for in blood, with the cost of victory often appearing far higher than the strategic value of the ground taken. The liberation of Rome in June 1944 provided a brief morale boost, but it did little to alter the fundamental strategic reality of the campaign. Even after the fall of the capital, the German army remained a cohesive and dangerous force, retreating to the next prepared line of defense. The Gothic line awaited, stretching across the northern mountains, promising yet another series of brutal battles for the exhausted Allied divisions. The soldiers who fought in Italy often felt like the forgotten men of the war, overshadowed by the massive buildup for the invasion of Normandy. Yet, their contribution was vital, as they tied down dozens of German divisions that might have otherwise been deployed to the western or eastern fronts. The terrain dictated the pace of the war, forcing a slow, methodical approach that favored the defenders' ability to trade space for time. Rivers like the Rapido became synonymous with slaughter, as soldiers attempted to cross under the watchful eyes of snipers and artillery spotters. The logistical nightmare of supplying an army in such mountainous terrain added another layer of complexity to an already difficult military operation. Engineers worked tirelessly to build roads and bridges, often under fire, to keep the flow of ammunition and medical supplies moving to the front. The human cost of the Italian campaign was immense, with tens of thousands of casualties suffered on both sides during the long, arduous trek north. Many of these men were young, far from home, and facing an enemy who utilized every cave, bunker, and ruin to maximize the defensive advantage. The psychological toll of fighting in such a landscape, where the enemy was always above you, was a constant burden for the infantrymen. Despite these hardships, the Allied forces maintained their pressure, slowly grinding down the German capacity to resist through sheer attrition. It was a war of small unit actions, where individual bravery often determined the outcome of a local skirmish for a vital hill or pass. The coordination between air power and ground forces was essential, yet even air superiority could not fully negate the advantage of the mountains. As the months dragged on, the initial optimism of the Allied High Command was replaced by a grim determination to see the campaign through. The Italian theater became a crucible, testing the limits of endurance for soldiers who were forced to fight in some of the war's worst conditions. The strategic importance of the campaign remains a subject of debate, but the tactical reality was undeniable. It was a brutal, grinding slog. The German retreat was slow and deliberate, a masterclass in defensive withdrawal that kept the Allied forces constantly engaged and off balance. By the time the final battles arrived in 1945, the landscape had been scarred by years of conflict, leaving behind a trail of devastation. The Gothic line was eventually breached, but only after months of intense fighting that further depleted the resources of both the attackers and defenders. The final collapse of the German forces in Italy came only as the wider war in Europe reached its inevitable and total conclusion. Looking back, the campaign serves as a reminder of how geography can fundamentally alter the nature of military strategy and tactical execution. The myth of the soft underbelly was shattered by the harsh reality of the Italian mountains and the resilience of the men defending them. It was a campaign characterized by high costs and slow progress, yet it played a crucial role in the eventual defeat of the Axis. The lessons learned in the valleys and on the peaks of Italy were paid for in the lives of those who fought and died there. These soldiers faced challenges that were unique to this theater, demanding a level of adaptability and grit that defined their service. The legacy of the Italian campaign is one of endurance, as the Allied forces overcame immense obstacles to achieve their ultimate strategic goals. The battles fought here were not just against an enemy, but against the very environment itself, which seemed to conspire against the attackers. Ultimately, the campaign proved that there is no such thing as a soft front when facing a determined and well-entrenched adversary. The sacrifices made in the Italian mountains remain a testament to the courage of the troops who endured the long, difficult road to victory. As the dust settled on the final battlefields, the scale of the struggle became clear, reflecting the intensity of the fight for every inch. The Italian campaign stands as a stark example of the complexities of war, where grand strategy often collides with the brutal reality of terrain. These intense battles set the stage for a long and attritional war of movement, shattering any illusions of a quick or easy victory. The story of the Italian campaign remains a vital chapter in the history of the Second World War, defined by its struggle and its cost. Following the hard-fought breakthrough at Monte Cassino, the Allied forces finally achieved a major strategic victory with the liberation of Rome in June 1944. The city, once a symbol of fascist power, was now in Allied hands, marking a significant turning point in the Mediterranean theater of operations. This milestone was a moment of immense relief, and celebration for the troops. Yet the momentum did not lead to a swift German collapse. German commanders, far from defeated, initiated a disciplined and methodical retreat, pulling their battered divisions back toward the northern reaches of the peninsula. They were executing a masterclass in tactical withdrawal, carefully trading space for time while preserving their remaining combat strength against the advancing Allied pressure. Their destination was the formidable Gothic Line, a series of defensive fortifications carved deep into the rugged peaks of the northern Apennine Mountains. This new defensive barrier was designed to exploit the natural geography, turning the entire mountain range into an impenetrable wall of steel and concrete. For the Allied soldiers, the liberation of Rome was merely a brief respite before facing another series of final, punishing battles in the north. The campaign, which many hoped would conclude quickly, was destined to drag on well into the freezing, unforgiving months of the spring of 1945. Throughout this grueling phase, the combination of harsh winter weather and incredibly difficult topography turned every single mountain pass into a lethal fortress. Soldiers found themselves fighting in conditions that defied imagination, navigating steep, rocky slopes while under constant observation from the heights above. The terrain itself became an enemy, with narrow, winding roads and deep river valleys creating natural bottlenecks that stalled the Allied armored divisions. Every advance required a slow, methodical grind, as infantry units struggled to clear positions that were seemingly carved directly into the living rock. The tactical ingenuity of German commanders, who utilized the high ground to perfection, ensured that every mile of Italian territory was bought with heavy losses. They placed artillery and machine gun nests in positions that dominated the valleys, making any attempt to move forward a perilous and costly endeavor. Allied forces were forced to adapt, relying heavily on air support and artillery barrages to soften up the defenses before sending in the infantry. Despite these efforts, the defensive depth of the Gothic line meant that for every bunker destroyed, another appeared on the next ridgeline. The fighting was characterized by close-quarters combat, where the advantage often shifted based on who held the highest point on the mountain. It was a war of attrition, where the physical exhaustion of the troops was matched only by the relentless nature of the enemy's defensive posture. Yet, the campaign served a broader strategic purpose that extended far beyond the immediate struggle for control of the Italian mountain passes. It functioned as a vital theater that diverted significant Axis resources away from other critical fronts, straining the German war machine to its limit. By keeping these divisions pinned down in Italy, the Allies effectively prevented them from reinforcing the crucial battlefields in France and the East. This diversion was essential, as it thinned the German response to the D-Day landings and allowed the Allied push into Germany to gain momentum. The cost of this strategy was high, paid in the blood of the men who fought through the mud, snow, and jagged peaks of the Apennines. Churchill's initial description of Italy as the soft underbelly of Europe had long since been proven wrong by the reality on the ground. It was never soft. Rather, it was a grueling, long-term commitment that tested the endurance and resolve of Allied soldiers until the very end. The logistical nightmare of supplying an army in such mountainous terrain added another layer of complexity to an already difficult military operation. Supplies had to be hauled up narrow trails by mule or carried by hand, as vehicles could not navigate the steep, treacherous mountain paths. This logistical struggle mirrored the tactical one, as both sides fought not just against each other, but against the sheer brutality of the environment. As the months passed, the Allied forces slowly chipped away at the Gothic line, inching their way toward the fertile plains of the Po Valley. The final battles were characterized by a desperate intensity, as the German forces fought to hold their positions while their homeland faced collapse. By the final days of the war in Europe, the Italian theater stood as a testament to the immense cost of victory in a landscape designed for defense. The liberation of the North was finally achieved, but it came only after the most sustained and difficult fighting of the entire Mediterranean campaign. Reflecting on the campaign, historians often point to the resilience of the soldiers who endured such extreme conditions without losing their fighting spirit. The Italian campaign remains a stark reminder of how geography can dictate the pace and intensity of war, turning a secondary front into a primary struggle. Ultimately, the fall of the Gothic line signaled the end of the war in Italy, closing a chapter defined by sacrifice, endurance, and strategic necessity.